Welcome back. Today we are looking at an important conversation in the world of nutrition, prevention, and scientific research. This presentation comes from the NIH Office of Dietary Supplements seminar series. The title is Beyond the Cosmos: How Hybrid Clinical Trials of Dietary Supplements Delve Deeper into Mechanism and Efficacy. The speaker is Dr. Howard Sesso, a researcher affiliated with Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School, and the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health.
He has also conducted several small-scale clinical trials testing supplements and nutrition, plus initiated an epigenetics working groups stemming from several research grants across PHS and Vital and Cosmos. So we are going to enjoy Dr. Sesso's presentation. He's going to be discussing how hybrid clinical trials of dietary supplements delve deeper into mechanism and efficacy. And Dr. Sesso, the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much, and hopefully everyone can see the screen here. It's a pleasure to be here, pleasure to be with all of you. I'm also happy to see that the seminars are restarting now with things moving forward. I'm going to be offering my perspectives, looking at the Cosmos trial and also a few other the trials that we've been involved in, looking at how we can design better trials to understand more about the effects of dietary supplements, particularly with regard to mechanism and efficacy. Just some disclosures. The work that I've been involved in for more than 2 decades now really can't be done without industry support and collaboration. This includes Haleon with regard to Cosmos and the Physicians Health Study 2, as well as Mars Edge for Cosmos in particular. And I've got other disclosures for other projects that I've been undertaking. So I want to start with a few general concepts when we think about chronic disease, dietary supplements. Chronic disease, I think, sometimes kind of misguides us a little bit about thinking about prevention or treatment or management of things as we're older, when in fact it's really more about the life course and healthy aging. And it's also more, obviously part of it is increasing life expectancy, but a lot of it really revolves around the idea of looking beyond the clinical outcomes and getting into brain health and wellness outcomes and improving quality of life. And again, this isn't true not just when we're middle-aged and older adults, but it starts at birth. It starts even before birth. So we need to be thinking about dietary supplements in clinical trials, particularly hybrid clinical trials, across the age spectrum in its complete form. I think the other point that's also worth noting, and we already know this, is that diet is incredibly complicated. This is just one example of a schematic. When we think about, maybe it's maybe it's parts of the body here on the left side, or some of the specific essential vitamins and minerals and trace minerals and the food sources. How do dietary supplements fit in? Well, I think sometimes as much as we think diet is complicated, I think it's very fair to say that dietary supplements are just as complicated. And this is not necessarily a function of the DeShays Act, the 1994 DeShays Act that had come forth that, of course, established the Office of Dietary Supplements now more than 3 decades ago. The original charge, among others, was to think about promoting the scientific study of supplements for maintaining health and preventing chronic disease. We know it goes well beyond that now, today. And even how we define dietary supplements, of course, continues to evolve. It's not just a dietary ingredient taken by mouth in some form. It's not just the essential vitamins and minerals, but we have a host of other types of compounds and botanicals that are included here. And they come in lots of different forms. And of course, not just DeShay, but as we look at our regulatory framework and thinking about labeling of products for dietary supplements, it's a very complicated picture. And just as one example of that, much of my work over the years, and I would say most of the presentation that you'll hear here, revolves around multivitamin, multimineral formulations. Now, these remain the most commonly used dietary supplement in the U.S. among all adults. But it's a very interesting and complicated story. It's not a simple one-size-fits-all when you think about how even multivitamin, multimineral supplements can differ on lots of levels. It's obviously going to differ on formulation. There are just sometimes more subtle, sometimes more not so subtle differences in combinations and amounts of vitamins and minerals, other bioactives or herbals or other compounds that are added in there. Target populations, this is a more recent evolution. It kind of used to be a single type of multivitamin that everyone would consider taking, but now it's become very specialized for kids, for men, for women, for older adults. And then also thinking about specific outcomes in mind. It might be bone health or eye health or brain health. And anyone going to the store shelf today, and this is just one picture as an example, is really overwhelmed, not just for specific individual vitamins and minerals and bioactives, but especially even in the multivitamin space itself, has its own complexity to it. So how do we disentangle it? Well, it's not easy when we do scientific studies, we tend to focus on individual dietary supplements, examples of that. A lot of the work that I'll be showing you today from Cosmos is really derived from the Physicians Health Study 2 trial. This was a part of a 2x2x2x2 factorial trial that included a multivitamin at the time in middle-aged and older men. And when we had published these results now more than 10 years ago, there were some interesting findings that served as the foundation in part for the Cosmos trial. One is that we had seen that those men that were randomized to take a multivitamin daily had a small but statistically significant 8% reduction in total cancer. And we saw for other site-specific cancers a fairly consistent lowering of risk, whether significant or not. More interestingly, we saw that for men that were age 70 and up, the effect actually strengthened to an 18% reduction, although that interaction, that statistical interaction by age did not differ compared to younger men. We also saw that those men taking a multivitamin actually had a lower risk of developing cataract, 9% lower risk, as well as having cataract surgery. So there were some pretty clear signals that had emerged from the Physicians Health Study 2 trial that helped in part to initiate the cocoa supplement and multivitamin outcome study, or COSMOS. And as you'll see, this is an example of what we would consider to be a hybrid clinical trial testing a dietary supplement. That is a framework that we want to think more carefully about as we consider other clinical trials moving forward. Now, one thing I want to acknowledge is that I'm one of two multiple PIs of the Cosmos trial. My other is Dr. Joanne Manson. It was really with her effort, along with many others, as you'll see, that Cosmos not only came to fruition, but also has flourished over the last several years, in particular with recent publications that I'll be highlighting. Cosmos more broadly is consisting of more than 21,000 older women and men across the US. So women age 65 and up, men age 60 and up, that were initially free of CVD and also recently diagnosed cancer. When we look at Cosmos, it's a 2x2 factorial trial. I'll talk a little bit about the cocoflavanol component in a bit, but we'll be emphasizing a little bit more on the multivitamin components of the Cosmos trial findings. Median follow-up was 3.5 years. Our primary outcomes were major cardiovascular events as well as total cancer. And as you'll see, we've been leveraging our hybrid design with bloods and clinic assessments to further enrich our ability to look at mechanism and efficacy in different ways. Now, one other point worth noting, now this is a deliberately complicated slide, but when we look at dietary supplements and doing clinical trials, whether large or short or small, collaboration is key. We have seen in our experience and knowing others in the field over the years that these types of trials cannot be done, especially with dietary supplements, without collaboration across industry partners, as well as foundations and consumer health groups, of course, the National Institutes of Health and the various institutes that are involved, including the Office of Dietary Supplements, and then we here in the hospitals and the academic institutions as well. All of this collectively is what transforms the science into more definitive science, and especially through randomized clinical trials. And as you'll see, Cosmos has been very much a successful product of that, and also hopefully a framework moving forward for how we can better conceive new trials in different areas looking at dietary supplements across the life course. I do want to comment briefly on the cocoa extract intervention of Cosmos. There was, leading into Cosmos, a fair amount of evidence actually on some of the mechanisms of effect, but not necessarily a trial that was looking at clinical cardiovascular endpoints in Cosmos. And this was one of the main reasons that the Cosmos trial was conceived. I will not be showing these data, but I have these highlighted in green. We've had some recent, oops, my apologies. We've had some recent papers that have come out that have highlighted some of the cocoa extract's potential benefits with hypertension in particular, as well as C-reactive protein. But more to the point, when we looked at the main findings for the cocoa flavanol or cocoa extract intervention in Cosmos, we saw some interesting findings both for intention to treat analyses as well as per protocol analyses that raise some other broader questions about how we look at the trial data and how we analyze it, particularly when we're looking at diet, nutrition, including dietary supplements. Overall for Cosmos, for our primary endpoint of total cardiovascular disease, which encompassed many of the, actually all the secondary endpoints you see here, except for all-cause mortality, we saw a 10% reduction, although it was not statistically significant. Interestingly, when we started to look at each of the individual endpoints for cardiovascular disease, as well as other combined endpoints, we saw a consistent lowering of cardiovascular risk. And in particular, we saw that for cardiovascular disease death, there was a statistically significant 27% reduction for those taking cocoa extract daily versus placebo. Furthermore, under other outcomes, this was not pre-specified, but if you were to look at a typical MACE outcome, we saw a significant 16% reduction for cocoa flavanols on MI, stroke, and CVD death. But what's interesting is that when we compare the intention to treat analyses with the per protocol analyses for those who were compliant with the intervention, taking 3/4 of the pills on average daily, we saw that the effects actually strengthened. Now, of course, this breaks the beauty of randomization in clinical trials, but it does highlight some of the important considerations when we look at trials of dietary supplements and understanding how the compliance-based analyses might give us a little bit more information and context, understanding that those who are actually taking the cocoa extract pills in this case actually had stronger effects on the cardiovascular endpoints of interest. Furthermore, in Cosmos, and we'll be discussing this a little bit for the multivitamin intervention, having an objective biomarker of not just compliance, but of intake is essential. In the case of cocoa flavanols, we have gamma valerolactone metabolites, or GVLM, which is a validated marker of dietary flavanol intake. What we had in Cosmos is a subset of more than 2,000 participants who had provided baseline and at least one spot urine sample during follow-up from which we can measure GVLM levels. And sure enough, as you can see, in red is the intervention group, blue is placebo. Those that were taking the cocoa flavanols actually had a more than threefold increase in GVLM. And this serves as an important point for these nutritional trials that we do in dietary supplements of having these objective biomarkers.
It enrolled more than 21,000 older adults in the United States to study whether cocoa extract or a multivitamin could affect major health outcomes like cardiovascular disease and cancer. That is a major study, and what makes it important is not just the size, it is the structure. Cosmos was built to test big questions in a rigorous way, not guesswork, not hype, not trends, but evidence. Researchers looked at long-term health outcomes and asked whether these supplements made a measurable difference. Before I forget, this episode is sponsored by theysourcesales.com. That's THEYSOURCESALES.com. We are your source for natural wellness products made to support your everyday lifestyle. If you are looking for CMOS, natural health products, supplements, and wellness support, be sure to visit theysourcesales.com and check out what we have available. Use discount code SHOP10 to take 10% off all online orders.